President Trump nominated to the Supreme Court Brett Kavanaugh, a 53-year-old judge who currently sits on the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. Kavanaugh spent most of his life in Republican politics. He worked as staff secretary for George W. Bush. Before that, he worked for Ken Starr in the 90s, where he investigated whether Vince Foster's death was really a suicide and helped write the report to Congress that led to Bill Clinton's impeachment. Blast from the past. Going to be fun for everyone. Since then, however, he's also said that indicting a sitting president would ill-serve the public interest. 538.com ranked the ideologies of these potential nominees, and Kavanaugh ranked as more conservative than Kennedy, Roberts, Alito, and Gorsuch. Basically, as right-wing as Clarence Thomas. Gentlemen, first reactions to this pick.
I mean, I think we all just this has been a bad day for everybody, and I think we all just need to be honest that this is a seismic shift in the makeup of the court. We've now gone from Kennedy as sort of center swing to John Roberts is the center of the court. He is the swing vote to the extent that there is one, which shows you how much it's shifted. And like, I hate to give the Trump White House credit, but they've done an effective job of managing this process. They did so with Gorsuch. They prevented leaks. They're selling their nominee in a primetime address. But it's also it's an example of Trump being fully owned by these interest groups. I mean, thinking back during the campaign, Trump sort of floated his sister as maybe being on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Remember? And then Ted Cruz kicked the shit out of him for it and called her a radical pro-abortion extremist.
She'd be better than Kavanaugh, though.
It's a thing. It's a nice thing you say about the current president's sister. And so weeks later, they released a list of judges generated by the Heritage Foundation. And then later on, it was added to with this Federalist Society list run by a creep named Leonard Leo. And so, I mean, the whole goal of this list and this process to make sure there's not another Kennedy, there's not another moderate. So we need to worry that everything we care about, from Roe v. Wade to the right to organize in a union to the Affordable Care Act, is at risk. I mean, this is a monumental, brutal day for people who care about what we care about.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I guess, I'd just say it's not, what a surprise. Trump chose a right-wing white guy who hates the Clintons and doesn't believe a president should be indicted. So, what a twist.
Yeah, let's talk about
what a twist.
Choosing Kavanaugh. I mean, like you said, Tommy, it's crazy that we got to a point where we have a Republican president who's just going to automatically pick from a list that a far right-wing group put together, that a special interest group that demanded he pick a certain justice. So that's crazy.
It speaks also to... It speaks to the dirty deal at the heart of the Trump administration. The dirty deal of Republicans will look past the corruption and chaos and vulgarity and racism and misogyny to get the fucking judges.
Right.
This is it. So of course he does. He's like, you mean they'll tolerate me if I just choose a judge from this list and they'll love me? Okay, I'm done. I don't care.
Right.
Great.
Well, it also and let's talk about among the four finalists. He could have picked Hardiman, who was the runner-up last time, to Gorsuch. Hardiman, though, had a background that wasn't quite as defined, didn't have as much writing. Some people thought maybe on certain issues Hardiman might be more moderate. Some of the base was a little worried that he might be a Judge Souter, who was famously picked by a Republican president and then turned out to be more moderate than they thought. Amy Barrett, another possibility. Also, people didn't know exactly what her rulings were. So this is definitely it's probably the most partisan pick because this person Kavanaugh was in Republican politics for a very long time, has the most opinion, like he has a paper trail that's just miles long from when he was staff secretary in the White House. From
to the point where McConnell is worried about apparently that paper trail.
Well, that's the point here. McConnell apparently over the weekend told Trump that he was more nervous about Kavanaugh being the pick because he thought that there was a longer paper trail. He said that he was concerned about the volume of documents Kavanaugh created during his 12 years on the Court of Appeals, as well as his role in the Ken Starr investigation, as well as his role in the Bush White House. And McConnell was worried that Kavanaugh could help the Democrats delay the nomination until after the new court session begins in October.
And I want to talk about the Bush White House years for a minute because when you work at the White House, every email you send or every document that you work on is part of the Presidential Records Act. It has to be stored and kept. So Kavanaugh's emails are sitting somewhere at the Bush Library. The archivist controls them. And so when the Obama White House put forward Elena Kagan to be our Supreme Court nominee, they went through all the emails down in Little Rock that were the Clinton library from her time in the Clinton administration and released them. And so Democrats and the press need to demand that Kavanaugh's emails all be released, and they should all be placed online. They should not be in some box, faxed somewhere, have people fly down there. It should all be on a website like Kagan's are right now, because that's the precedent.
Yeah. And it's well, so what is it? What do we think it says about Trump that he went with what is potentially the riskiest nominee to get through the Senate? What was it about Brett Kavanaugh that he liked so much more than Hardiman or Barrett or Kethledge or some of the other possibilities? One thing could be that Kavanaugh wrote a briefing once that said that the President of the United States should have, quote, absolute discretion to determine whether and when to appoint or fire a special counsel, and that a president should not be criminally indicted no matter what evidence of wrongdoing is uncovered.
Yeah, we were talking about these when the names were first coming out. We were talking about them at the office, and it was always like, oh, people are saying that Kavanaugh's not the smart pick because all these other people can get through more easily, and Kavanaugh has this record of saying this thing around investigations, and it's like, well, it's not the smart pick unless you're a fucking criminal. Then it's a really smart pick to pick the guy that will protect you.
Yeah, I think that's probably a piece of it. I also think that Trump just wants a fight. He doesn't like.
Yeah, he likes fights.
His operating principle at this White House is to fight about fucking everything, whether it's tariffs or the courts. So this guy, people tell him he can't pick this guy, I'm going to pick this guy. Also, I mean, apparently he had some problems with Kavanaugh's ties to the Bush administration because he just treats all things Bush like they're an enemy. But we don't know. We can't get inside this bozo's brain. I mean, I'm sure
people got him over that.
I think that these special interest groups probably told him who they wanted him to pick, and this has been a foregone conclusion for a long time.
Let's talk about some of the other issues, what we know about Kavanaugh. On the Affordable Care Act, he's argued that even if the Supreme Court upholds a law, a president can refuse to enforce some of it. So that's great news for people who care about the Affordable Care Act. He has declared the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau unconstitutional. On Roe versus Wade, during his D.C. Circuit confirmation, he played the game where he said he'd respect precedent and decline to share his personal views. So we can expect that anyone on this list that Leonard Leo put together is going to try to overturn Roe v. Wade. But I think it's going to be up to Democratic senators to try to probe during the hearings to try to get something out of him.
Yeah, this is a simple one. There's a huge difference between someone saying, as a lower court judge, I will respect a precedent, and someone who is going to be on the Supreme Court saying they're going to respect a precedent. Respecting a precedent at a lower court level is a totally different matter. So I already see that being put out there by people trying to kind of, I assume, get to Collins and Murkowski, but it's a totally unrelated point.
Yeah. The other thing we know about him is when he was nominated to the Circuit Court of Appeals, it was held up for a long time because Democrats thought he was too extreme back then, back in the early 2000s.
Oh, remember when we could hold things up because somebody was too extreme?
Right.
What a time.
We should note that Collins and Murkowski both voted for him in 2006. But Collins put out a statement already, and Murkowski saying it was a very sort of bland statement. We're going to meet with him. We're going to hear his views. We look forward to the confirmation hearing. So they're not giving anything up yet. I mean, the other thing, Tommy, to your point that Trump wants a fight, it is both distressing, annoying, fucking infuriating that we are now going to spend the summer reliving the political fights of the 1990s, that we're going to go through the Ken Starr investigation again, that we're going to talk about the Clintons again, and then we're going to be treated to reliving the Bush years again since he was staff secretary in the Bush White House.
That's too soon for that. That's too soon. That's like bringing Spider-Man back. Just like 2 years. Andrew Garfield was Spider-Man 2 seconds after Tobey Maguire, you know?
I think they're... Yeah, fuck. I hope that this doesn't focus too much on the Ken Starr stuff. I don't know. Maybe if there's something useful that we should talk about there. I mean, I'm sure that in his Bush administration emails, he weighed in on some really touchy things like the Iraq War, Gitmo,
surveillance,
torture, surveillance, right? So there could be some real interesting things he's said or done that we should talk about. The thing that drives me crazy about Republicans versus Democrats on these judicial discussions. They've done this masterful job of branding their judges and their judicial philosophy as conservative or constitutionalist or, whatever, like original textist. I forget the fucking
original textist.
They're like
Original textist. He's still on Instant Messenger. He's on AIM.
They're like GOP erogenous zone terminology, but it's total bullshit. I mean, the minute these judges get named to a court, they are activists. They are exactly what they claim not to be. They find novel ways to overturn decades-old precedent, as this court is doing right now. So, I don't know how we fix that messaging fight, because we've gotten rolled for decades on this front, but we need to do a better job.
I think what we've seen so far is that Democrats have, at least in the preparation for this announcement, has sort of prepared for that and are now talking about these Supreme Court picks as basically, an extension of the Republican Party.
I mean, that was like one senator said that, right? I mean,
it's pretty much like Schumer's message. I mean, it's all their messaging right now, which I think is good. They just need to keep that up.
It's not name Merrick Garland.
What's that?
That's not name Merrick Garland. That's not our message.
Right? Yeah. No kidding.
I think that this is I think your point is right. I actually think this fight is a good place to do a better job. I can see us getting drawn into conversations about the Ken Starr investigation. And the kind of salacious questions that Kavanaugh wanted to ask Bill Clinton, and it's all very interesting. But then I think there's really two.
What were those things you were referencing?
Look, I don't know that I can even say it on this podcast without blushing, frankly. But let's just say that Brett Kavanaugh wanted to ask Bill Clinton some very specific, vulgar questions. Anyway, there's two. I feel like there's what
I was sincerely just trying to have you give the listeners the gist of what he said.
Look, it was about where Bill Clinton's gist went. Frankly, I'm sorry you asked. I don't want to say it. Anyway, the point is the specific sexual things. The point is we shouldn't talk about that because there's two goals in this fight. One is to stop Kavanaugh, and that is really, really hard.
Go to stopkavanaugh.com.
Is that a real website?
It's up.
Cool. Is someone good running it?
Yeah.
You got a good webmaster on that thing?
It's Brian Fallon's group.
Oh, cool. All right, great. Yeah, go there. So anyway, there's two goals. Goal number one is to do everything we can to stop Kavanaugh. That's really, really hard. The second goal is to make sure that the fight we have on Kavanaugh is a fight that helps us politically in the fall and in judicial fights to come. And that's a fight we have to win. And it's a fight we can win, that we have better odds of winning that fight. And that fight is best fought on unions, regulation, choice, and healthcare, and the issues of what Kavanaugh's radical sort of originalist right-wing judicial philosophy, what that will mean for actual people. So this idea that we're going to get dragged into the Bush years, unless there's really important stuff about his record, I think, or the Clinton years, certainly, I think will be a bad path to go. And I think so far, actually, we'll see what happens, but I think Senate Democrats certainly understand that because they've been hitting choice and they've been hitting healthcare pretty hard.
Here's my vote for one of the best messages I've heard from Senate Democrats so far. Bob Casey, up for re-election in Pennsylvania, a state that Trump fucking won. He decided to come out against the nominee this morning before he knew who it was. And here's what he said in the statement. This is some of his statement. This list is the bidding of corporate special interests hell-bent on handing healthcare over to insurance companies and crushing unions. Any judge on this list is fruit of a corrupt process straight from the D.C. swamp. I will oppose the nomination because it represents a corrupt bargain with the far right, big corporation, and Washington special interests.
That is
outstanding.
And also 100% accurate.
I mean, it turned out even more true for Brett Kavanaugh.
Right. Like the Koch brothers and their friends fund these organizations like the Federalist Society who create this pipeline of judges who then slash regulations and make them shitloads of money and put Citizens United forward so they can spend unlimited amounts on their candidates. It is this circular, horrifying process that is setting us back for generations.
And I will say that, like, having been in politics long enough, I guarantee that message polls very, very strongly, not just in blue states, but in red states and among some Trump voters as well.
You know what's really great about that statement, too, is that there's this hemming and hawing DC conversation. Like, I got to wait to see who the nominee is. I got to make sure I give him a fair hearing. And should you come out before he's even picked someone? Doesn't that seem, isn't that mean you're not going to take these seriously? Doesn't it mean you're too partisan? All of that. And there's a legitimate debate there. However, what's interesting is somebody comes up with a statement like that just tells the truth about the situation. And it's an incredibly powerful argument that says, no, I shouldn't wait for somebody. Let's not pretend this process is something else. Let's not pretend this is just a random individual. We're going to give a fair hearing. This guy was chosen from a list. He was chosen from a list of people to do the bidding of these interests. That's absolutely true.
That's right.
Yeah. And I also think there's this debate now, like, oh, is Trump's Supreme Court nominee going to put red state Democrats in a tough spot?
No.
Fuck no, it's not. This is the easiest no vote I can ever imagine. Think about what happened with Republicans when they not only opposed Merrick Garland, but opposed even a fucking hearing for President Obama's Supreme Court
nominee. They lost the
Senate. Nothing happened. Not one single Republican paid any price for opposing any Supreme Court justice from Barack Obama. None.
But if you want your base to walk away from you and you're a Democrat, vote for this guy. Be a Brett Kavanaugh fan.
If a red state Democrat votes no on Kavanaugh, they are going to have the base voters that they need who are going to show up, who are going to volunteer, vote for them, knock on doors, make phone calls. They're going to have them excited and showing up for them. If they vote yes on this, I want to find the swing voter who was like, I was really close to voting for Joe Manchin or Heidi Heitkamp, but then, I don't know, they said no to Brett Kavanaugh. Who
I love.
Right, exactly.
I'm a huge Kavanaugh. I'm a Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh.
It's Kavanaugh.
We're all Kavanaughs.
We're the Kavanaughs.
No, they don't. This voter doesn't like President Trump, doesn't like how the Republicans have been handling Congress, but they do really love Brett Kavanaugh, and they're really disappointed.
And
no, that's not going to happen.
And also, speaking to what Bob Casey said, vote no and make the argument on the terms you believe.
That's right.
Make the argument on the terms of health care. Make the argument on the terms of access to reproductive health, because that is a winning argument literally in every state in the union.
And that's another thing about Bob Casey's statement, because if I was a senator, I'd be making the argument based on the fact that, Brett Kavanaugh is going to criminalize abortion, and I'd be talking about the ASA and stuff like that. Bob Casey is one of these senators. He is personally against abortion, but he never legislates that way. He legislates pro-choice. He's got a good record there. But he decided to make the argument on his terms, on his issues, what he thought was right for the voters in his state. And that is possible for every single Democrat in the Senate.
And there's been some criticism too of Casey, like, this was a politically expedient way to get out of a tough decision on someone who's qualified. So what?
No, it's a fight. It's him picking a fight, and I'd rather be on that side than the other one of that message.
And this is a hard fight. I mean, we have to hold all of the red state Democrats, and then we have to put maximum leverage on Collins and Murkowski, and that's going to be very hard, but we should try as hard as we possibly can. But we need to do a better job long-term of educating Democrats about why these fights are so important. I mean, conservatives have spent decades in churches and in campaign ads and in campaigns making judicial nominations the critical voting issues to their base. Our folks we failed at it. We've totally fucking failed. And what has happened in this last term with Kennedy has unraveled all kinds of stuff. God help us for what comes next if this clown gets through.
And here's the potential of what you're talking about. HuffPo did some polling just in the last couple of weeks, and they've already found a shift when they ask, is the Supreme Court going to be a big issue for what you vote on in 2018? And Clinton voters are now it's more important to them than Trump voters. And that's the first time that's happened. So it's starting to switch a little bit. But you're right, we have failed on it for a fucking decade or more.
I shouldn't call Kavanaugh a clown. He's not a clown. He's just a very conservative jurist.
So you're not a Kavanaugh?
Nope.
He's on the fence. And just one other thing about this, too, is Republicans have also done a very good job of arguing this on the philosophy, right? They have a philosophy that they have been defending for a really long time. And we don't do that as much as Democrats.
You know what our new philosophy is? Democracy. That's what we're fighting for. It's pretty easy now. We now have I think Ezra Klein said this. It's not just an undemocratic Supreme Court, which it's always been. It's now an anti-democratic Supreme Court, whether it comes to voting rights, whether it comes to union rights, whether it comes to everything like that. And reproductive rights.
So I think making the philosophical argument means that they have to add a third plank, right? Right now it's been about choice and it's been about healthcare. And I'm sure that they poll the best, I'm sure. They're also winning issues that I think people really do care about. I think the polling is borne out by the facts.
Correct.
But there is a third piece to this, which is what you're talking about, which is I don't care how it polls. There needs to be an argument about the concentration of power that this court has allowed, the concentration of corporate power, the concentration of wealth. That extends from unions and consumer protections to voting rights. And I think that needs to be the third piece of this argument that I think so far Senate Democrats have not made central. And I think they should because, to Tommy's point, in the long term, this is actually a fight about corporate power.
Also, like, Republicans have done a very good job talking about people like George Soros, demagoguing them, lying about them, really, but making boogeymen out of these big moneyed interests. Like, we should start talking about this guy, Leonard Leo. He's the executive vice president of the Federalist Society. He took a leave of absence to advise Trump on the Supreme Court vacancy and gave him this 25-person potential list. This guy has been instrumental in installing Roberts, Samuel Alito, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh if he gets through. That is more Supreme Court justices than any president of the United States in recent memory. I mean, that is
fucking elected this guy. No one.
Unbelievable influence. And they built like this massive pipeline. And this is a guy who was like behind the attacks on the Ground Zero mosque back in 2011. He oversees this network of dark money groups. Like, this is some nefarious swamp shit that Trump claimed to have run against, and now it is front and center in all his judicial appointments.
Power versus democracy, 2018. That's what we're up against. That's the struggle here.